National Mentoring Day happens every October, but wait, no matter when you are watching this, I'm going to tell you what it's all about if you're not really sure, why you need to be thinking about having a mentor and how to go about getting started. And I am even going to be checking in with my very first mentor from many, many years ago. So let's go on with it. I'm Chris, and having a mentor should make a huge difference to our mindset and our resilience. In fact, if you have ever had a mentor who's made that huge difference, go ahead and type mentoring rocks in the comments in huge capital letters. So what is mentoring then? Well, think of your mentor as your guide, somebody who has walked the path that you are currently on. They might be a level or two above you in an organisation, and it's somebody who you could perhaps see yourself emulating in your own style. And that's really important. Emulating does not mean copy. However you are going to develop from your mentor has to be in your own authentic style. Though it could be somebody that you could see yourself learning really well from and perhaps even admire their style and how they've gotten to where you want to get to. If we think about what mentoring isn't, it's different to coaching, it's different to feedback, it's absolutely different to counselling. With mentoring, we're talking about ongoing, flexible development, perhaps more career-based, whereas with coaching, we're talking about it's more skill-based, perhaps one thing that we want to develop over a shorter period of time. Feedback is much more focused on what's happened in the past and how we can improve. And then counselling, of course, is much more on an emotional and perhaps more of a behavioural level. So mentoring is much more future-based and generally looking at a broader scope of development. It's usually voluntary, and perhaps most notably, it's not usually provided by somebody who's also managing you. It does happen, though there's a very good reason why it's usually not, which I'll get to in a second. I'm lucky enough to have had several brilliant mentors during my career and been honoured enough to have been asked to be a mentor several times as well. But when we are thinking about having that first mentor, we might stop and ask ourselves, what's the big deal? Why bother having a mentor? Well, in my experience, we are so close to our own development, too close sometimes, that we can't see the wood for the trees and we don't know what we want to develop in or what we need to develop in. If we get a good mentor and we set the relationship up in the right way, then they can help to shine a light on some of our blind spots. And stick around, because I am going to be talking later about how we go about setting up the relationship. It's so important. Then we can listen to our mentor's experience and we can translate that into our world in terms of how their learning could perhaps help us. So that reason of why our mentor is generally not our manager is because our mentor over time becomes our professional confidant, somebody who we can tell our deepest, darkest professional secrets to, somebody who's neutral and objective that we can use as a sounding board when we need to. And another brilliant benefit of having a mentor is that they make us accountable. We've all been there. It's one thing saying that we're going to do something for our development. When you know you've committed to your mentor who is giving up their time to support you, it becomes something else and it takes on a whole new dynamic for your accountability. If you're getting some good stuff out of the video so far, do remember to subscribe and hit that bell so you know when I'm back. There are loads more videos on the channel to help your mindset and your resilience. Now, I put together the video primarily for mentees, that's people being mentored or even people considering having a mentor, but I did want to put in a little bit of a perspective from the mentor's point of view as well. So what I did was I hit up my first ever mentor, Abby McMullen, and she agreed to talk to me about how the experience was for her when she mentored me many, many years ago. We're talking maybe 15 years ago, if not longer. We were out of touch all that time. And here's what she had to say. So Abby, hello, you were my first ever mentor when I got into my management role back in the early noughties. Thank you so much for agreeing to talk to me and hit you up out of the blue after all these years.
My pleasure. It's really nice to see you again.
Yes, you too. I guess I just wanted to start by asking, can you remember what it was like to be asked to be a mentor way back when?
I remember being really touched to be asked. It was a bolt out of the blue. I wasn't expecting it, especially as we worked in different departments. You know, we were connected, but we weren't that closely connected. So I remember feeling really good about it. Yeah, it was a real pleasure.
And I was so pleased that you said yes. What, if anything, did you get out of the experience of being a mentor?
I think it was really nice because it gave me the opportunity to reflect on some stuff. You know, when you're mentoring somebody, it has to be meaningful, and therefore you have to put some thought into it, and you have to sit and think to yourself, okay, what can I impart? You know, what is useful? And so it gives you a bit of time to do some self-reflection.
Yeah.
It's amazing for the ego to be asked is lovely, and you know, to feel useful is really nice as well. You know, to feel like you could be contributing something that is of benefit to somebody else, just like somebody has done for you in the past.
What difference did you see in me as your mentee from start to finish?
I think it was a while ago, as you know, but my recollections are, I remember you sort of growing in confidence. I think that point in your career, you were just moving into sort of management and sort of raising your gaze a little bit. And I think I saw you really transition from somebody who was a bit of a sole operator, technical expert, into somebody with a broader remit and a broader thought process.
Yeah.
You know, and I was really delighted. You know, delighted for you. Not that I felt that I'd played a massive role, but I was really delighted that you were doing that for yourself. It was great.
Nice. And you had a huge impact. I remember two of the things that we worked on that I wanted to get from you was the element of strategic thinking and like you've just kind of alluded to, not getting bogged down in that detail and helping me to reframe when I needed to. And that was so valuable. So thank you.
It's a difficult transition for anybody, isn't it? To going from that kind of technical expert into somebody who's got to think about a bit more and let go of stuff. It's not an easy transition.
What advice would you give to anyone who is thinking of having a mentor?
Definitely do it. You know, find somebody that you like and that you can be really honest with, because I think it has to be, you know, somebody that you can get on with and can be honest with, and they can be honest with you. And you know, it can do no harm, even if you approach somebody and they say no. At least you've had the practice of identifying somebody and asking them and dealing with that. But you know, it can do you no harm. So definitely, if you're thinking about it, go for it.
What advice would you give to anyone who was thinking of being a mentor?
I would say take it as a massive compliment, you know, and I like the idea of what you were saying earlier about paying it forward. You know, at some point somebody has been influential on you, and it's wonderful. It's a gift to be influential on somebody else. But take it seriously, you know, think about things. It's not just a cozy chat. It's a bit more than that, and it needs to be a bit more than that.
Thank you. Well, Abby, I just want to say around about the time of the year, if people are watching this on National Mentoring Day, thank you for being my mentor. I want to express my heartfelt thanks and deepest appreciation for all the encouragement, guidance and advice that you invested in me all those years ago, and it made such a difference for me. You were a true inspiration. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for getting back in touch and doing this. It's been great and well done. You know, you've done really well, and that's your own efforts, nobody else's.
Thank you, Abby. Bye. And that's just a small snippet of how effective mentoring can be from both perspectives. Now, what I also did was I put a shout out to my network to ask them for any feedback or any input they have to go into the video to help from the mentor's perspective. We got loads of feedback. I'm just going to give you a few quick highlights. We've got be human about it rather than on a business level. Be ready to adapt and compromise. No death by PowerPoint. Adapt your communication type to the person you are mentoring. And that if things don't go the right way, which sometimes they don't, then it can be a learning curve. And that as a mentor, you're going to be prone to some self-doubt and overthinking the situation. situation. And that's normal. I love that. Don't let that dull your smile. As a mentor, it's a brilliant opportunity to signboard ideas, to get different perspectives, pick a wise brain. And that mentoring is so vital for our growth, but it often drops down the priority list, which is generally when we need support the most. And then I had a virtual cuppa with somebody in my network, Emma Porter, who has done a huge amount of work on mentoring as part of a qualification. And her biggest piece of advice that she would give to anyone thinking of being a mentor is to be 100% in. She says it takes effort, so when you get into it as a mentor, you have to sign up to that person. And then for the mentee, her biggest piece of advice was to set the expectations and to have clear boundaries of what's expected, what's not expected, what's part of the mentor and what's out of scope. So without further ado, let us move on to how to get started. So we've looked at what mentoring is and why you should think about having one. If we go on to how to get started, you might have a mentoring scheme in your organisation and that might match you up with the amazing, perfect mentor. But in my experience, they are few and far between, and they also do have their downsides as well, in that they can get us tied up in so much red tape and bureaucracy. My advice to you, particularly if you don't have any kind of mentoring scheme, is just do something. Make a start, get started. With our mindset, when it comes to mentoring, it's so easy to put so many blockers and barriers in our way. What if they say no? I don't have the time. I don't really know what I would be mentored on. If you have a feeling that mentoring might be the way forward for you, ask some people, find out people who have had a mentor, how was their experience? And remember, when it comes to our development, it might feel scary, it's going to feel clunky, it's going to feel uncomfortable. And that's a sign that we are changing, that we are trying to develop, that we are wanting to improve. Listen to those little signals that your body's sending you and do the work to understand where they're coming from. But when all is said and done, JFDI. Just flipping do it. Now, when it comes to selecting your potential mentor, really think about what it is that you might want to develop on. So what I mean by that is I have had loads of mentors in my past for specific development areas that I have pinpointed as the mentee, as the person being mentored. Sometimes, as Abby helped me with, it was perhaps my strategic thinking. Other mentors I've had have really helped me and made a huge difference when it comes to that leadership perspective. And then other mentors I have selected because I wanted to develop how I communicated. And so for each one of those development areas, I would think about who is the potential mentor who I see doing that so brilliantly. Remember what I said, that I could perhaps emulate in my own style and learn from their experience of what they have done to get there in that development area. Then comes the scary part. We sidle up to them, we put on our big boy or our big girl pants and we say, "Please will you be my mentor?" That's my best Puss in Boots impression, by the way. Be open when you ask, be prepared and give them permission to say no, and be thankful for that, because what you do not want is to get into a mentoring relationship with somebody who says yes and then constantly puts you off or doesn't have the time to give you for your development. All of my mentors have always said yes. It does happen where they might say no, and as you heard with Abby, it's often a huge honour to be asked, and I can vouch for that when I've been asked to be a mentor as well. Be brave, ask, and they will probably say yes. But if it's a no, go back to the drawing board, go back and start that process again and ask somebody else. Don't give up at the first hurdle if in the unlikely event you do get a no. Okay, so the scary part is over. They've said yes, and now it's time to get started. I am so sorry if this is going to be a bit of a spoiler alert for you, but the most important thing here is it is your development. Our development is our development. Your mentor is going to be doing so much to support your development that there are a number of things that now have to happen. That means that you have to arrange the sessions. You get to decide how often you're going to meet, when you're going to meet, where you're going to meet, how long you're going to meet for. As I've mentioned, you need to be thinking before that first meeting about what is it particularly that you might want to develop in. That can change, but make sure you've done the work to think about your development areas, because you know that's going to be their first question, right? And you do not want your answer to be, I don't know really, I thought you could tell me that. When setting up that relationship, take some time. In fact, the bulk of the first session might all come down to how you contract between you and your mentor to set up that relationship. And that is so important in setting the ground rules of how you and your mentor are going to work together over time. So agree all that stuff, the when, the where, the how, and then set some clear boundaries. And what I mean by that is talk about what's in scope of the mentoring, what's out of scope. How do you like to receive feedback? What's off limits? Is there anything that you don't want to talk with your mentor about, or you don't want your mentor to broach? Be respectful of each other and draw that line in the sand so that if something does happen and come along that you don't want to talk about or you feel uncomfortable talking about, that you've both given each other permission to say that. Talk about confidentiality. Does everything that you talk about stay between you and your mentor, or do other people need to get involved at certain points? And if that's the case, agree that up front. And perhaps one of the most important things, and I cannot stress this enough, is in that first meeting when you're setting the expectations, talk about how long the mentoring relationship might go on for. And you can review it over time. Do you feel like it might be a 3-month thing, a 6-month thing? Perhaps it might go on for longer than that. Often 6 months is a good starting point. But put a time scale against it, because, trust me, and I speak from experience here, what you do not want is a mentor who you suddenly pass in the corridor, or you see them in some meeting or some networking event, and you go very awkwardly, oh, we haven't had a mentoring session in 4 months. Oh, are we still doing that mentoring thing? I don't know, because they didn't ask me and I didn't say anything to them. It all feels a bit awkward. You do not want that. So put a time scale on it. And when we come to wrap up the mentoring relationship, then we can reflect back, look at all the development, all the milestones, all the changes that have been achieved. We can do that reflecting back, and we can say to each other, have you got what you need? Do you need any further support? And we can draw a line under it. That doesn't mean that we can't still work together, we can't still catch up for a coffee. The mentoring is done. Mentoring shouldn't really go on forever, and there has to come a time when we wave goodbye to each other as mentor and mentee. If you've been putting off having a mentor because of that nagging inner critic, then watch this video now and tell them to sit down and shut up. Good luck with your mentoring. Leave me a comment. Tell me, have you had a mentor? What was it like? Perhaps you've been the mentor. I would love to know your experience. As always, remember to subscribe and hit that bell so you know when I'm back, and give me a like if you enjoyed the video. Thank you so much. I will see you soon. Over and out. Bye.